Hello everyone and welcome back to Historical Accounts, and today we're going to be talking about Mariya Oktyabrskaya. So today we're going to be looking at this rather interesting story of this woman. You've probably heard of it. Mariya's husband was actually killed during World War II, and she ended up getting her hands on a T-34 tank and used it in combat against the Germans. But what I think most people don't fail to realize that, yes, this is an incredible story, but just how unusual and how everything had to come together to allow this woman to basically get her revenge. Let's go ahead and look at the history of Mariya and the circumstances and politics that allowed her this opportunity. Now, Mariya herself was nothing extraordinary growing up. She was born into a poor family in Ukraine in the Crimean Peninsula, and she was one of 10 children. And before World War II, she was just an average worker. She worked in a cannery before she became a telephone operator. However, in 1925, she married her husband, Mariya Oktyabrskaya. Ilya was actually a Soviet army officer, and it's at this time that Mariya begins to actually acquire an interest in military matters. She actually joins a group known as the Military Wives Council and was trained as an army nurse. She also at this time learns how to use weapons and even drive vehicles. She said, "Marry a serviceman and you serve in the army. An officer's wife is not only a proud woman, but also a responsible title." And by all accounts, she was a proud Soviet army officer's wife. Now, at the outbreak of the Eastern Front conflict of World War II, Mariya was actually moved to Siberia. And she'd actually remain in Siberia for the next 2 years when she would find out that her husband had died in 1941, 2 years earlier. Now, of course, this absolutely enraged Mariya, and she wanted vengeance. She wanted justice for her husband. So she sold all of her money, everything she had, to donate money for the Red Army, the Soviet Union, to build a tank. She requested that a T-34, which at the time was the main tank of the Soviet Union, which I've already discussed, so if you really want to look at that, go look at one of my earlier videos where I discussed Soviet tanks. But as this was the main tank of the Soviet Union, it was the one that they could produce the most to confront the German threat. She wanted one of these to be used. She asked that not only the money be used to build the tank, but that this tank would be named the Fighting Girlfriend, and that she would get permission to be allowed to drive it. And while it wasn't unusual for the Soviet Union to allow women in support and limited combat roles, they didn't really allow women to drive tanks. However, the State Defense Committee actually agreed to all of these terms, which was unusual in itself, but also they enrolled Mariya in a 5-month tank training program. Now, if you're asking why this is a big deal, at this point in the war, tank crews were getting minimal training. We're talking days, maybe a couple of weeks at the most, before being sent out to the front lines. And honestly, she was probably given this role as part of a propaganda tool, boost the morale of the Soviet Union, make everyone feel that everyone was doing their part to win this war. And she actually got a lot of flack in the early days from other tankers, basically making fun of her, thinking she was a joke. However, she would prove them wrong. After her training, Mariya would actually join the 2nd Guards Tank Corps and be posted with the 26th Guard Tank Brigade as a driver and a mechanic in September of 1943. Now, she saw her first combat on October 21st, 1943. And in this conflict, she managed to destroy a machine gun nest and artillery guns. And actually, her tank ended up getting hit and damaged. And regardless of the orders she was given, she actually jumped out of her tank and repaired it under heavy fire. And because of this, she was actually promoted to the rank of sergeant. Our next major conflict came around November 17th and 18th, when Soviet forces captured the town of Novoye Selo in the region of Vitebsk during a night battle. On the night of November 17th, Mariya took part in an assault on a German position. However, German artillery shell exploded against her tank's track, halting her advance. Mariya and another crewman actually jumped out of their tank to repair the track, while other crew members provided covering fire from the turret. Eventually, they managed to not only fix the tank, but get it back into the fight. In January of 1944, she took place in what would be her final attack. During the battle, she drove her T-34 around German defenses and destroyed resistance that had been mounted in trenches and machine gun nests. Her crew also managed to destroy a German self-propelled gun. Subsequently, her tank was hit by a German anti-tank shell right into the tracks, and the tank was completely immobilized. Now, doing what she has done previously, she got out of her tank to try and repair it during the middle of the fight, and she actually did manage to repair the tread on the tank. However, incoming artillery fire exploded near her, and a piece of shrapnel ended up hitting her in the head, and she lost consciousness. After the battle, she was transported to a field hospital near Kiev, where she remained in a coma for 2 months before finally dying. That following August, she would end up being posthumously made a hero of the Soviet Union in recognition of her bravery in the battles. But there you have it, the story of Mariya Oktyabrskaya, who had a very short-lived military career, but a rather interesting one. And honestly, it could have just been a political move, but she showed that she had skills and that she could actually go out there and do what needed to be done. And because of that, nearly 80 years later, we're still talking about her. So that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.